We get blasted with these surges of information, right? That just get sent out into all the different veins of society, right? And it's like the signals, and they're hitting everyone's brain neuron activity. And then we're all having a reaction to that information. What's the point? What's the point of this constant banter that is politics? The indigenous mind, versus the modern Western mind, right? This is what's different in the experience of how we meet the experience of working with plants. This ties in to this big theme that I've been, giving energy and attention to, of the theme around the disease of forgetfulness and the act of remembering that we're here in connection with this greater living energy that's the Mother Earth. But we've forgotten that because of the conditioning in our minds. We have to stop. We have to slow it all down. I've been saying that to myself a lot lately, it's okay to slow it all down. In my last diet in the Amazon, that was what the plants were showing me. Slow it all down. Slow it all down.
Hello friends, welcome to another episode of the Potential Paradigms Show. So today in our world, we are finding ourselves surrounded by political polarization, ongoing wars, and the destruction of our environment. The media is presenting us with a minefield of narratives where they have either figured it out or they know who to blame. And frankly, many of us, including myself, are fatigued with this approach. So this episode is really a different way, a mature way, a way of the heart that my guest today is calling the indigenous mind. And by the indigenous mind, he doesn't mean a sort of a regression or romanticization of the past, but it really points to something crucial that we might have forgotten in our modern day rush. My guest, Jarvie, is a seasoned shaman and lives a life at the intersection of spiritual transformation and music. Over the past 3 decades, Jens has been a scholar and practitioner of quite a few wisdom traditions, but in recent years, he has been serving as a guide and practitioner of the Shapibo tradition of the Amazon. So this is a really timely conversation, and I really hope that it gives you some faith in a way forward. And if it does, please share it with your friends, and I will see you soon. Thank you. So first of all, I'm really grateful that you're here, and thank you for making the time.
Yeah, you're so welcome, Kanan.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, and it's been a long time coming, like you said. So looking forward to diving in and see what wants to emerge here with us today.
Yes. So yeah, the first question that came to me when I met you the first time, what I sensed was a remarkable presence, and also that a very strong is not the right word, but an eye contact, a very that you were there, and I've become accustomed to it, of course, but it was an invitation for me. To, like as I was saying earlier, to hang in there, to sort of be in that space, and that it was okay. And for me, it's relaxing into that, right? But there was nothing uncomfortable about it. But it was like, wow, okay, yeah, I can up level my presence and just be in this space that's being cultivated for the two of us. So my question would be. Am I the only one who has observed this?
I don't think you are the only one. As we were starting this podcast, I was laughing to myself because I'm just returning home from a really powerful men's retreat that was held up in the Pacific Northwest. And there was a point of that men's retreat where we were doing some exercises, and one of those exercises was to find yourself with another man and, have some exchange and dialogue. And as I found myself with that other man, the first thing he said was, I don't know why, but I just feel very nervous in your presence. And, I kind of just said, okay, well, that's okay. I'm okay with that. And maybe it's something that I haven't fully taken the time to understand, that maybe is a reality in my experience. Because when I do engage with people, I'm very much like,
Hmm.
I am present with you. You are my, you know, my attention. So I'm giving you my attention, and oftentimes that comes through a very strong gazing of my eyes, and just being really focused and attuned to what's happening in this moment. So the answer
Yeah.
is yes. You are not the only one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, well, thank you. I wasn't planning
Mm-hmm.
to begin here. So you have spent such a time. I mean, you live such a rich life as a musician, and your music is deeply connected with your journey as a practitioner,
Mm-hmm.
scholar of the indigenous traditions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you've also not studied one, but several. So maybe we can begin there
Mm.
as to what was the sort of journey, your interest into this transformation arc. How did that sort of begin, and
Mm-hmm.
where it is now?
Yeah, I mean, it's really such a big question, because I think at the core of that answer is that there was a feeling within me that knew there was something else, or something more, and I think that's often where the spiritual journey does begin, is there something more than this, this experience of just living and being a human. There's an energetic, presence of the universe that surrounds us. And when people ask me that question, so when did your spiritual journey begin? It often takes me back to this very distinct moment when I was about 14 years old. And at the time when I was 14 years old, I had a lot of, unsupervised time, so to speak, me and my brother and our neighbors. My father was out working on his bachelor's degree to become a teacher. So we were often home at night, doing our own thing and exploring, you know, uh, different mind-altering substances such as marijuana and mushrooms. And this particular night, one of our friends had brought over a bag of mushrooms. I think it was the Golden Teachers or something to that note. And we proceeded to eat the mushrooms. And I immediately was kind of opened into this space of just feeling kind of in a sense of being mesmerized or in awe with, like, wow, life is so cool. Like, everything looks so cool. This experience is so cool. And I proceeded to walk up to my neighbor's house. And at that point, I was by myself, catching up with the other friends that had gone before me. And I stopped halfway up the trail, and I looked up at the stars, and I just had this kind of like aha moment. Like, wow, there's just so much more, in this absolutely brilliant expression that is the sky and the stars. And it was kind of just this moment, maybe lasted, a minute or two. And then I went back to what I was doing. But I think that really was a stopping, pause moment of really feeling myself in the expanded state of just recognizing that there was so much more to me than just my basic human experience. And for the next 4 years, the explorations continued. Having grown up in a really quite phenomenal landscape of nature, in the high Sierras, about 3 hours east of here. That landscape held, me in such a potent way that regardless of how tough or, how much struggle there was in the immediacy of, home life or school life, we always had the refuge of nature. So all of our psychedelic journeys were in nature. Oftentimes, all of our gatherings were in nature, and, we were held by this magnificent landscape of the ancient trees and the rivers and the stones and the mountains and the creeks and the forests. And that is truly a signature to all of my being, because I grew up in that. And I think I shared with you yesterday, when I was about 18 years old, I was given this really special experience by my mom that she arranged for me to basically have a work position at this incredible eco lodge in Brazil, in the lower Amazonia rainforest outside of a town called Alta Floresta. And I got to go down when I was 18 years old and live for 6 months at this incredible eco lodge, only accessible by boat, where once again I was surrounded by the most magnificent array of life, nature, waters, trees, waterfalls, all of it, to a whole nother level, because, now we're talking the Amazon rainforest. And the other thing that was different is now I'm in a completely sober mind, right? So I'm not experiencing this through an alteration via these other plant medicines, but I'm here, I'm in my aloneness at 18 in the Amazon rainforest, and really getting a chance to meet myself essentially for the first time, because I had never gone on a journey like that where I was off on my own. And at that time, I started reading these books called the Cryon Writings that were written by a channel whose name is Lee Carroll. And the entity or the energy that he channels is known as Cryon. So these teachings were called the Cryon Writings. And they really had a very strong emphasis on what he referred to as the new love energy, an energy that was basically becoming very present on the planet right now, and that we all had access to this energy, and that and basically the instructions of how to communicate with this energy, as a tool for manifestation, as a tool for self-transformation, as a tool for expanding, in consciousness. And that really lit me up. It just made me feel so alive. I remember some of these moments of being, after reading this information, and I just felt so excited about it. Like, wow, this is incredible.
What time point was that, by the way?
This is at 18. This is all happening at 18.
Okay.
Yeah. And, so that was another big moment in the spiritual journey. So we had this moment when I was 14, another moment at 18, and fast forward to 20 and a half years old, and I find myself in Costa Rica, meeting the woman who then became my wife and mother of my two children, that was guided by a prayer that I had put into the field probably a year prior to that, really calling in a soulmate. And, thus living in Costa Rica, coming into connection with this woman, and within 3 months, us immediately becoming pregnant, with our first child, whose name is Olivia. And so the journey of fatherhood begins.
Yeah. I like how you said we got pregnant.
We got pregnant.
Yes.
Yeah. She's carrying the baby in her female body.
Yes.
But we are pregnant.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, as a 20-and-a-half-year-old kid, facing the reality of becoming a father, but because of the personality and the being that I am, I was very excited about it. I said, "Great, awesome. Let's have a family. This is wonderful. I'm so excited about this." And I really met my experience of becoming a father with a lot of joy and excitement. And I think at that point also I had enough experience of, kind of what freedom tasted like in myself. And I had enough dedication, devotion to kind of living this freedom, to the best of my abilities at 20 years old, that I really just valued at that point the quality of spirit guiding life, right? The quality of spirit guiding life. This is happening, so it's supposed to happen because everything happens the way it needs to happen. That propelled me, and my new family at that time, into now a bit of a different picture, which I would say essentially, with family came responsibility. With the responsibility, comes like, okay, well, now I need to provide for my family. But there was still always I was never willing to compromise, spirit. Like that was always really strong inside of me. I was never willing to compromise spirit. So if I was going to do something, it had to be aligned, with the spirit-led desire. In that journey, it led us to a community down in Marin County, which ended up becoming a cult after about 8 months. But in that time, when we were first brought into that community, they kind of enticed everyone to join that community through very good salaries. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. You want to pay me $40,000 a year to be a raw foods chef for this spiritual community that's based in Ascension, essentially led by the deity of Hathor? Wow. Okay. That sounds great. Now, I mean, there's so much I could go into here because this was after a very powerful transition of my mother passing away, right? So we get pregnant at 20 and a half. We find ourselves back in California. Our first child is born. 6 months later, my mother dies of brain cancer. Wow. 8 months from the point of finding that she had brain cancer and to the point of death. She didn't die in California. She decided that she needed to make one last journey to Brazil, to the town of Abadiânia, where she would go see John of God and attempt to be healed by his healing powers. She ended up dying in Abadiânia, which at that time when we got the news, I had a choice, as to whether or not I was going to go with her. And I made a choice that, I really can't go. I just had a child, my wife. I can't leave my family. And essentially I just had to say bye. And being kind of a happy-go-lucky, uber optimistic 20-year-old young man, it was like there was not really the understanding that she was going to die, And I can only feel that now because at 20 I couldn't feel that. I just, took her to the airport that day, saw how much pain and suffering she was in, and said, "I love you, Mom," but could tell that she was already halfway gone. So in receiving that news of her death, it was a lot to handle, but at the same time I had no capacity to grieve. I just did not know how to grieve at that point. So, I had my moment with it. Our family had its moment with it. And then, it was, okay, what's next? Thus, finding ourselves in this community where we were now in this like very dreamy, golden, opportunity. And so we said yes to this opportunity to live in this community where every day there was spiritual discourse and dialogue given from this woman who was channeling Hathor. And there was just something about her channel that I was like, I like this. Like, this feels resonant and true to me. And it's very persuasive, It's like, yes, we're going to ascend. 100%, no doubt in my mind. That's how confident of a young man I was. We are going to ascend 100%, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Right?
That does sound something a 20-year-old would say.
Exactly. Something a 20-year-old would say. Meanwhile, living in this community, after about 5 months, the writing started to, be pretty explicit on the walls, saying that this is quickly moving into the experience of a full-blown cult, especially when you get notice that the salaries are going to stop. We're still going to be fully taken care of, but here's going to be our new situation. By that point, my dad was quite worried about me. He had actually gone, to the extent of making us an appointment with a psychologist, where after that meeting, he didn't tell me, but he said that psychologist absolutely said, he's fully 100% in a cult. Get him out as quickly as you possibly can. Wow. I was blind to that in a way. But many gifts were given in that experience. One of those gifts being the introduction into transcendental meditation, where I was given my mantra that you use in that style of meditation, and thus began this deep inward journey of, okay, here's a tangible practice that I can do, every day, 20 minutes, close my eyes, say my mantra, and go within. And I began to cultivate that practice of sitting meditation. And I loved it. It was something that I really, just had to do every day. In conjunction to that, was eating a lot of raw food, practicing the raw food diet, which was in turn just, giving me a lot of energy. exploring fasting, yogic traditions, lots of input happening by this point. So here we are at another kind of, influential place that kind of sprung me in to the inner world. Fast forward a couple years later, I think by this time the realities of being a father, were kicking in. We had just had our second child, my dear son Ian. Responsibilities are growing. And this is, I would say, the point where I just started to feel the longing. There's something more here. I've had a good taste of spirit-led life. I've felt the excitement of being in that way. But there's something more. Something more is being asked of me. I need to dive in deeper. And that's where Naropa came into the picture. Where it was time to study. I wanted to study. I wanted to achieve something. So I said, if I'm going to go to college, there's no way I can handle a conventional college. It's just not going to happen. But Naropa, absolutely. Contemplative Buddhist university. This sounds amazing. So we pack up the whole family. At that point, actually, my wife at that time was pregnant with our second child. So we're traveling from California to Boulder, Colorado, and our Toyota 4Runner, going, starting school in August, no place to live, and all of our belongings in the car, and it's just gonna work out, right? That was the Jen's mentality. It's gonna work out. Like, again, coming back, I had so much faith and confidence in life, in spirit, that it's just gonna work out. It always does. We're so held and so cared for. So sure enough, get to Boulder. First night we landed a camp spot, we found the camp spot maybe online at that time. I think so. And we ended up camping there, and we could find out, we can camp here for 20 days. Perfect. That will give us enough time to find the next spot. So anyways, moving the story along, that was a 3-year period living in Boulder and being very immersed in the studies at Naropa, getting very much, influenced by the teachings of Trungpa Rinpoche, and a lot of the great thinkers that founded Naropa, and ever deepening into my meditation practice. At that time, I was developing a interdisciplinary degree called Music as a Mode of Transformation, bridging psychology, religious studies, and music. And I'm really starting to hone in on, like, what is this thing that I love and I want to do. And it was the sense of a religious experience, being close with God. Oh, how I have loved to be close with God. Like, that has been a driving, pillar of my life. I just want to be close to God. God is, the multiple names that we, orient ourselves to this sense of divine nature. And then music was this, place where I could express myself. I could share the messages that were wanting to flower out of me. And then the psychological aspect of just being fascinated by my mind, because, at that point, moving more into Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, the deep study of the mind, began to take effect. Oh, this too is mind, cultivating that presence of awareness. This too is mind, and walking through life, being aware, our breath, the experiences of our relating with others, our behaviors, our patterns, our conditions, all translated through the experience of mind. So at that point, I was, just starting to eat up whatever I could find that would feed me in these wisdom traditions. And also starting to really open up the exploration of ritual context through improvisation, that the music could create an experience that would open up the doors for an individual to have a deep, inner journey, where we don't know what is going to arise, but these different sounds and textures and songs and melodies were the guiding force behind that.
Yeah.
And I just felt like at that point I was like, there's a lot here that's very exciting to me. This is exciting to me. That music can make us feel certain ways, that these different sounds can, open up different felt somatic sense of emotion. And
So I have a few questions on that. So when you say that there were certain experiences that you wanted to share through music, were these states that you had been in that were wanting to communicate and be shared with people in the form of music?
yeah, so what that became, if we were to, jump forward yet again, is it became this offering called a meditation of mindfulness, sound, and song. That was one of the manifestations of this exploration that I was, cultivating, was to bring the experience of mindfulness meditation as the root foundation of here we are. And now we're going to lie back, we're going to relax, and we're going to experience soundscapes, And the thing about those soundscapes is they're guided by the moment, right? They're guided by the moment. So in my experience, a lot of magic can happen in that context when we don't have a plan, or we don't have necessarily an agenda behind what we're doing, but we're really listening closely into that deep relationship with spirit in that moment, and the impact, the effect that has on people, and then coming back, settling that energy, and now coming back into here we are in our waking life, right? So it's a full progression in the journey. And I think today, there's sound healing experiences to be had in every direction.
Yeah.
So I think that's very, very much in the same vein of that.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot there, but there are a few themes that I wanted to quickly touch on, and maybe then shift to some of your scholar practitioner experiences with the Shapibo tradition. But one thing that came was that in your arc, you have had experiences with a couple of channels, it looks like. So you were talking about the Cryon writings that was very influential.
Yeah.
Can you, are you more articulate about now what was the current of that sort of touched you?
Yeah, I think it really was just opening up to the idea that it was possible to communicate with something that was greater than ourselves, and that I could actually attune myself to this energy and kind of become a part of that current, as a way to experience my life, right? And I think essentially that's what was so exciting about that
Yeah.
moment at that time.
Yeah, this is also interesting to me in the context of, and maybe we talked about this earlier, this idea of possession. So in a lot of traditions, particularly in the tantric traditions, the yogic traditions, maybe on all traditions on earth, oftentimes you're worshiping a deity, or there's that kind of a practice. And the culmination of that practice often is the possession by the deity, right? In some ways, channeling to me seems like a different word for that. And there are degrees of sort of that possession.
Yeah.
And maybe to give you a prompt here is, could we say that we're always possessed by something, even if I'm depressed or sad or prayerful, grateful, I could separate myself and see that this is sort of a quality that I am imbibing in, that I'm bringing forth, and I can choose to
Yeah.
reconfigure that in some way, as you're alluding that you wanted to have that kind of something come through you. And because you're also a shamanic scholar and practitioner, how does that feel in terms of just the general human life?
Yeah. I mean, what's coming up for me as you share that is it brings up this aspect of language and this particular word possessed.
Yes.
And possessed has a very negative, connotation in our culture, I believe. It brings me back to all those scary movies
Yes.
that I used to watch as a
Yes.
kid. Like,
Yes.
I don't ever want to be possessed.
Right.
No one ever wants to be possessed.
Yes.
That's freaky, right? So, naturally my Western mind runs up against that. And I think what feels more aligned to me in this conversation around this topic is more a sense of how do I allow myself to be attuned, right? To be an instrument, make me an instrument, right? So that God, the divine spirit, can work through me, right? Work through my hands, speak through my words, my actions, and that feels more.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like the word enthusiasm comes from entheos, which is, again, don't want to use possession, but let's say an attunement to God. It's literally an attunement or possession by the deity or by God.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
in this case, you're possessed by God, and
Yeah.
The opposite of what the movie references would be the demonic possession,
Exactly.
sort of,
Yeah.
versus an angelic possession,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And as you said, we don't have to use that word, but there is this transformatory process that attunes us to be in this communication, and you enthusiastically shared a few minutes back of that you really wanted to be in contact
Yeah.
with God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in that, I think there is some, good conversation to be shared, because I think oftentimes we want to label this energy as something that's other than ourselves, or it's a deity that's, not us. And, how do I really know? And I think that's kind of the illumination of the mystery is maybe we don't ever really know. I don't ever really know. But what I do know is how it feels when I am attuned with the energy that feels to be, that I am close to the expression of my own divinity.
Yes. That's an interesting and a deep point. How does one know?
Yeah.
And if I had to reflect, it would be the more you see the truth, which is self-evident, that doesn't really, you just know that truth ultimately.
Yeah.
And the more that we become familiar with that, there's a sort of a maturity of sensing, like getting the GPS coordinates off
Yeah.
where it is that I want to go.
Yeah. And this particular conversation can go a lot of different directions, because if we started diving into looking at a lot of the indigenous, shamanic traditions, whether it be, the Dagara people of Africa or the Shapibo people of Peru or the Tibetan people of the high Himalayas, I think because they are so immersed in these worlds from, through so many thousands of years of tradition that, the identification with the certain aspect of deity, or water being, or whatever you want, whatever's being spoken to, that's a very real experience, right? And I think it's just, it all comes down to like what we're working with and how we're working with it.
Yeah. So a question that I would have for you is, you were saying that we can separate ourselves from these energies, right? And at some level, or the opposite, that we recognize the unity through in which these infinite energies are
Yeah.
taking place. And what are your like, because you've had these deep insights, how do you see the dance of energies now? Would you still invoke a deity?
Yeah, I mean, I think that brings me kind of to my my study in Bhakti Yoga. I think is a great place to look at this, because when I was very immersed in that practice of Bhakti Yoga, all of the chants are chanting to deities, chanting to Ganesha, chanting to Krishna, chanting to the Divine Mother. And so I think in that experience, as I know it through myself, I think it's the experience to get so immersed in the quality of those deities that those qualities then become a part of us, right? And by being able to give face, to the name, that is the deity, it only extends our devotion, right? Because now we can have a single pointed focus, on Ganesha, and I can really hone in and attune with these qualities of Ganesha, through every experience of my life, creating obstacles into opportunities, opening doors, remembering this deep-seated, roots of wisdom that we can always take refuge in. So I think, this is where deity practice, can be very powerful. To speak to the Shapibo tradition, same thing. When I go into the jungle and do a diet with a specific master plant, I'm focusing all of my energy and devotion on the presence and spirit of that master plant, in a prayer that says, please show me, please teach me how to be a good human, as, one of my teachers, shared with me. When you're in this practice of devoting yourself to the plant, you can always come back to just one question. Show me how to be a good human. Show me how to be a good practitioner of these ways. And then we have to surrender, the surrendering process. So I think the surrender is such a huge part of every endeavor to be immersed with God, right? Because desire itself won't do it, right? Desire is desire. It's something that drives us. But I believe that it's not until we actually are able to fully surrender. This is when we get to have, the experience of feeling close to our divinity, is when we let go completely. Now my vessel is ready to be an instrument. I've set the tone. I've made my prayers. I've given my offerings.
Yeah, what this brings for me is that there is, as you were describing, oftentimes we can pose a question, or the question could be in the form of prayer, as it is in this case.
Mm-hmm.
And you're really, you're calling in divinity or something, a higher power, so
Yeah.
to speak, because you don't know,
Yeah.
right? And that requires often sort of intensification of the desire, because we can have many desires. The energy could be scattered
Yeah.
all over the place. And so that I think prayer and ritual can serve the purpose of also concentrating
Absolutely.
that energy.
Yes. And creating the container that is necessary for that energy to cohere.
And then you said the surrender, which is you have done that process, and then you are letting go, just so that perhaps that the mind, that there is no more, perhaps even a further scattering or thinking about it
Yeah.
and stuff. You've launched the rocket, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm willing to let go that it's not going to be on my terms. It's not going to be on my terms. If God wants to take it away from me, God will take it away from me. That comes from the teaching of Satchitananda, Swami Satchitananda. If God's meant to take it away from us, we don't need it. If God takes things away from us, then we don't need them. They're not serving our spiritual journey. And that requires a lot of surrender to trust that deeply. And also brings us face to face with fear, right? Because fear is, when we no longer have control, that can be scary. Quite scary.
Yeah. So one of your deep study has been the Shapibo tradition, and because you've also explored other paths, I'm curious to see what, how would you compare, in a good way, as in comparative, as you've studied the cosmology of that tradition with, let's say, yoga, or your exposure to Tibetan Buddhism.
Yeah.
Naropa.
I don't know if I could do justice in bringing a comparative, explanation of those traditions, but from a personal
Yes.
perspective and place within my own study and observation, I've come to the conclusion currently, conclusion for me right now in this moment, that the earth-based shamanic traditions all carry such a similar thread, in that they all have a very vast multi-dimensional capacity, which is so much more than just this world that you and I see right here, right? There's so many simultaneous worlds existing all the time. And how do we navigate those worlds? We navigate those worlds through our ability to be clear, focused, centered, and present in our ability to meet, what's happening, right? And this opens us up into a lot of the subtle energetic, worlds that, you know, if I'm clear, centered, focused, and present, you know, I can meet the many qualities, you know, that express themselves through the various worlds that are, you know, happening all the time. And I think each tradition, you know, has the rituals, has the practices, you know, has the modalities that, you know, they all help us live in a greater attunement, you know, to the great cosmic force, you know, the great mother, the living expression that is the all-embodied magnificence of life, right? This notion that nothing is separate from anything else, that everything is intertwined and, you know, always in action and reaction, you know, to itself and each other. And that's the common thread that I see, that, you know, it's a vessel or a container that holds the cosmos, you know, from the stars above to the earth below and everything in between.
Yeah, fascinating. So you have also spent a lot of time and continue to do so. You take people for retreats and trips on plant diets and these explorations in these communities. And you're also working with these communities as well. So how has that experience been for you? Like, one question I would have in that is, do you think that there has been a disconnect of those communities from their deeper heritage, or is that?
Yeah, I feel a bit you know, I want to invite my own spirit of humility, and I want to presence and give voice to the fact that I am a white Western man, right? And it's very common for a white Western man to go down to an indigenous village and say, here's all the ways that you've, you know, become disconnected to your,
Let me tell you.
to your traditions. You know, and I say, no, that's not my place. You know, that's not my place at all, to judge or critique. Does my mind do that? Absolutely. You know, I was born into, you know, patterns of judgment and criticism.
Yeah.
But what is my practice and my intention when I go, you know, to these places? It's to sit with those people, you know, to experience the lives that they're living, you know, to feel maybe the things that they feel, and to know that it really is truly a gift, you know, to have even but a minute, you know, with you know, our indigenous brothers and sisters. And I pause in that, saying that, because you know, I just want to speak to the indigenous nature within all of us, you know, in that, and also acknowledge, you know, the hardships, you know, that those who aren't white Western bodies have gone through, you know, and the suffering that they have endured, you know, because of the colonialization and the capitalism, you know, and the greed hungry experience of those who want to extract, you know, everything.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And what I was sort of meaning was, of course, when I say degradation and disconnect, it is often associated with the colonial impact that has happened. But yeah, that's, I appreciate it because often I spent many years coming from my part of the world where I was totally convinced by the history
Mm-hmm.
that I read in school,
Mm-hmm.
which established the superiority of the colonial people, and that I
Yeah.
wanted to go there until I came here,
Yeah.
and then realized that history and anthropology is often written, not with very pure exploratory
Yeah.
sense, but it is again that criticism, and
Yeah.
sometimes there are clear agendas.
Yeah.
And that brings me to actually a very interesting article. A couple of times it taught me that I'll share with you because you've been down in the Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just came across, I think it was New Scientist, and I was just flipping through it, and by chance I saw an article on the Amazon. And it was an interesting article in the sense that they were saying that they're using now this technology of LiDAR and radar,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they discovered something that the elders, indigenous elders, have been saying for a long time, but it was discredited.
Mm.
And what it is that they were saying that they used to have villages in the Amazon, and I don't remember if it was several 100,000, but even up to 1 million people in these villages. And of course, they were dismissed. And I don't know what the reasons were. I forget, but they said, oh, perhaps primitive people, and how could they live, in the Amazon jungle
Mm-hmm.
without making, clearing out the whole forest and stuff. And we're also talking about very old times, so not 2,000-3,000, but this is 12, 13, 15,000 years ago. And what is happening is that using these scans, they're actually finding these structures in the forest that corroborate what the elders were saying.
Mm.
So that was fascinating
Yeah.
in a way, but also not fascinating. Earlier we were talking about Tibet, and in my own connection with those lands, the Tibetan Bon tradition, for example, is 18 to 22,000 year old tradition.
Yeah.
And since you have studied that tradition, you know the depth of their knowledge of the mind, so to speak.
Yeah.
So maybe they were much more advanced, if not always, in many ways,
Yeah.
and perhaps also in directions that we are not aware of,
Mm-hmm.
right? So yeah, it was. I just wanted to kind of pose that to you, as if you have, what are some things that might have shocked you, or something similar where you're like, you went there from the Western world,
Mm-hmm.
from a plane into a rather very close to nature and simple arrangement.
Yeah.
And were there any things that shocked you?
Um, I think I've been shocked many times that when I go down there and I do a plant diet and I am drinking, one of the primary teacher medicines, known as ayahuasca, that I'm continually shocked at how vast the intelligence of the plants truly is. That really I couldn't even begin to illuminate, just how vast that intelligence is. And to think of exactly that, like, of course, these traditions and cultures are way more advanced than we could ever know, in how far back these technologies go, because that's the way they've lived, for thousands of years, in attunement and connection with this cosmic intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, several things come to mind, but maybe let's take this. So you were, from what I know about reading your newsletter and your work,
Mm-hmm.
that you're taking people. You're not just doing the medicine ceremonies, if they are happening or not happening
Mm-hmm.
here, but they are happening in their environments
Yeah.
with plant dietas and other details of these traditions, right? And is there a change? Are you seeing a change now in the culture of plant medicine in the West, where people are transitioning to a deeper deeper way? Is this another iteration, or would you say that it's only a few people who are on the deeper side?
I think I understand your question.
Yeah.
And just to make sure I understand your question, are you asking that when people have the opportunity to sit in a more traditional context, does that open a deeper experience directly with those individuals in their relationships, specifically to the plants or specifically to the cosmic intelligence? Or maybe that's the part I'd like
No,
to...
brilliant. Yeah, thank you for actually articulating, clarifying it more. Yes, I think you're touching on a few themes that are coming up with me. So the plant diets, and in combination with the main medicine, so to speak. What has been your experience of the difference? Is it deeper, or it gets informed in other ways?
So they work hand in hand. I think when we bring the plant diets into the experience of drinking the medicine of ayahuasca, that's when we really get to get a taste of the greater depth that is the teaching and tradition and understanding of some of these, ancient cultures, specifically the ancient Amazonian cultures that have been, living and listening, with the forest for thousands of years. I think without that context of plant diets and drinking ayahuasca more in the West, or in our modern day experience, oftentimes it becomes more about self-transformation, right? And like looking at our own psychology and exploring the vast world that is our personal being, everything that has made us who we are today, our relationships to our families, to all the experiences, whether they be traumatic or joyful, or whatever they are. So we're definitely opening up a whole nother world when we put ourselves in, to the natural setting from where these plants originally come from, in the traditions, from which those ways have been practiced for thousands of years. Now we're held by a much greater cosmology within that framework, that gives us the opportunity to see and experience firsthand, the deeper workings of, how the intelligence of the plants reveal themselves.
Very interesting. So it almost seems like that. Well, our Western attitude towards most things is a quick fix, or amp up the dosage and just have an immediate experience.
Yeah.
So apart from that, you're saying that it's in those settings, what is being revealed apart from our inner landscape of the human life is also the intelligence of the plants.
I want to back up a little bit and just also point to, I don't think one is better than the other. Right? Because, and I don't think one is separate, from this greater intelligence than the other. I think they're both very much interlinked with this greater intelligence because it's the intelligence of the plants. I think what's different is, and this is a really fun topic that I really love, is the indigenous mind, versus the modern Western mind. Right. This is what's different in the experience of how we meet the experience of working with plants.
Yeah. Yeah. What the image that was coming to my mind is that we are, when we are making contact with these medicines, we are returning to an indigenous mind, and then perhaps the cosmic mind, or however you want to say that, like going in a deeper trajectory, and making that trip, doing the dieta, the other details, connecting with the ritual, making it slower,
Yeah.
is uncovering, is that you're going through the layers in a more, maybe an integrated way, rather than an immediate step. That could be one one aspect of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's such a big topic,
Yes.
you know, that I don't know if it's as simple and cut and
Yes.
dry.
Yes. Of course.
Is that I think we could only be so lucky to experience a minute of indigenous mind, you know, because we're working with a lot of programming
Yes.
in our Western minds.
Yes.
And
yeah.
and we're working with this experience of being conditioned to live up here in the head.
Figure it out.
Right? This is where it's all at. It's in the head. So we want to figure it all out, you know, and I think, you know, and again, all of this is open for discussion, conversation, you know. All I know is, you know, the experiences that I've had in my own curiosity. You know, I'll illuminate that word, curiosity. My own curiosity, and also my willingness to be humble enough, you know, within myself, that maybe, just maybe, I could get a little taste of what it's like to exist in indigenous mind. You know, and I think that that's, you know, why people come to the plants, is because we're in our lives and we're living from the world of our minds, and it's intense and it's overwhelming, and oftentimes it feels like way too much to handle. And sometimes when we come to the plants, they give us permission to settle and relax and feel this affirmation that, and within all of those ways that I feel, I'm also very cared for, and I'm very much held and loved by the universe, by the all-embodied presence that is our beloved Pachamama, our Mother Earth. You know, not just an expression to, you know, call the soil or the trees, but an actual living, you know, entity, you know, of expression, you know, the Mother Earth.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that.
And I just want to give some space to that, like, for us, for you and I to have a little moment
Yeah.
of like the spirit of Mother Earth. Like, wow. And for me, this ties in to this big theme that I've been, you know, giving energy and attention to, of the theme around the disease of forgetfulness and the act of remembering. You know, I think that that's what this time is strongly emphasizing,
Yeah.
is just how much we've forgotten. You know, just how far we've come from that feeling that you and I just experienced. That we're here in connection with this greater living energy that's the Mother Earth. But we've forgotten that because of the conditioning in our minds.
Yeah.
And so we have to, like, stop. You know, we have to slow it all down. I've been saying that to myself a lot lately, like, it's okay to slow it all down. You know, in my last diet in the Amazon, that was what the plants were showing me. Slow it all down. Slow it all down.
Yeah. 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 So much depth there, so much things we could go into. I like how you shared about the indigenous mind, and from later, as we are connecting with the presence of what's holding, everything together, and carrying us in everything. It's amazing how human perhaps it's a function of our mind and capacity that we can be completely in our head and psychological stuff. But there is the sky and there are the stars and of course the earth that we walk on.
Yeah.
And all of that is not disconnected, right?
Yeah.
That is amazing. I mean, if we really recognize that, there is no room for loneliness because you're not really alone.
Exactly.
Right.
And yet, what is one of our greatest epidemics on the planet right now?
Yeah.
Loneliness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a sort of a great segue to something that we were talking about yesterday, tuning in, and we did want to touch on that. So maybe let's dive into that.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, your body of work is enormous, and you were sharing with us your history, which is so rich, and so we have this opportunity of here you are after 3 decades or more of these transformatory processes and multiple pathways, in a non-dogmatic fashion, very open way. And we thought that maybe let's reflect on what's happening in our world, right as today, this moment. We have political polarity in a very extreme way, which of course has been building up for quite some time.
Yeah.
And it seems like we're at an apogee, at a climax moment, perhaps. And also that's being reflected in the culture, not only here in the United States, but also over the world. We have multiple wars going on.
Yeah.
And so, maybe we can begin there. I know that one of the words that you used was the density of it. And maybe you can unpack the context of how you are using that word.
Yeah, it's interesting as you're saying all this. I'm reflecting on an indigenous mind, and I'm thinking about when I go to, for example, the village of Pauyan is one of the Shapibo villages that I visit when I'm down in Peru, and politics aren't necessarily influencing the attitude of the village, right? I don't think much of the Western things that we get so worked up about are influencing the everyday life of the people in those village. They're operating on a much different experience of how they relate to all of that, right? And the result is relaxation. Essentially, there's a relaxed feeling, in the village for the most part. You can feel maybe some people are more attuned to that. So I just, I want to give that some voice of, there's that common line of like what we give our energy to grows or something to that sort. And I think that this is the design of this modern Western world, is like we get blasted with like these surges of information, right? That just get sent out into all the different veins of society, right? And it's like the signals, and they're hitting everyone's brain neuron activity. And then we're all having a reaction to that information. And naturally, everyone's having whatever reaction they're having. But it's creating a lot of energy. Oftentimes it's creating a lot of anxiousness. it's creating all of these things that I think if we sat back and had a look, it's like, oh yeah, all of those things, are coming because of the way we're reacting to this bombardment of continual information that's just being, splattered at us all the time. So it doesn't surprise me that the world's in chaos, right? Because this is like the depth of it all. It's like this is what we're working with. We have a very deep psychological conditioning, that's shaped each of us, into the experience of how we relate to, information. So as you were opening up the topic of this part of our conversation, I heard this line, what's the point? What's the point of it all? What's the point of this constant banter that is politics? It's a good question.
Yeah.
What's the point of it all? What good is it truly doing? And if we were to strip it all down and get to that, core singular focus of, well, we need some sort of leadership, right? Essentially, we need some sort of leadership to help this massive thing along, right? And we could go a lot of different ways in this. So maybe I'll just like pause right there, and perhaps you'd like to input.
No, and that's what the last thing that you said is a good point. That there are a lot of ways and there are a lot of details, right? And often with for example, the Palestine-Israel war, I started to look into that a little bit some time ago, and one of the words that I heard was that it's too complex, it's too nuanced.
Yeah.
And, I think earlier we were talking is that there is a level of the heart.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe you are a master of these subtle arts, right? Or have developed mastery and continue to do so. So to me, I was already going in at this point in my life is that is, I cannot lose my contact as I enter these a minefield of narratives.
Yeah.
And I went with the openness of listening to both, all extreme narratives, the extreme of the extreme ones. And when I go to the heart level, it is not complex or nuanced. Right? Complexity and nuance to me we're confused actually.
Yeah.
And not to give like that there is an external entity out there, but some of it is in fact, I don't know to what degree, but it's intentional. I don't know how the governments work actually, especially when we have people who don't have their mind fully functioning. So I get surprised, how does this machine actually work?
Yeah. I mean, let's just pause right there.
Yeah.
We're confused. Can we be with that?
Yeah.
It's a very confusing time. I have a lot of compassion for our children of this time because I've heard it from my own kids. It's confusing. How are we possibly supposed to know what to do? I've literally heard my son speak, a lot of what's felt amidst, kids my age is, what's the point? The world has already been fucked up and destroyed. So what does that leave us? What's the point? And I think within there's like this, there is this like deep layer of confusion. And if we go a little bit farther into that, we start to touch upon, what we spoke of yesterday, which is like this the sadness,
Mm.
the sadness that when we can actually stop enough, and if it's even possible to come into the space of, as you said, feeling it from our hearts, I think probably what we would all feel is a whole lot of sadness, and grief. And my mind's going to this vision of what happens when everyone stops and feels that. What happens when everyone stops for a moment and takes a pause to just feel how sad it is that we've come to this moment where we've forgotten so deeply just how precious life truly is. And that we gave ourselves permission to go into this grief portal, as a humanity. And I want to torpedo through that birth canal, in having maybe had the opportunity to grieve. What is the core desire that comes out of that? I'm hearing the word honesty. Can we please just have some honesty, of what is actually going on here, right? Can everyone be honest? Can I first start by being honest with myself? And can we, ripple out into all of our relationships this experience of honesty? And can we call to our to those in leadership and power for their honesty? Is this idealism? Probably, right?
Yeah.
But this is also like in the juxtaposition, the beauty of this time, because as much as we have this deep sorrow, grief, sadness, confusion, density, we also have this incredibly magnified creativity, inspiration, more people than ever waking up, to the truth of their own hearts, right? So I think there's also this like really amazing moment to celebrate it all.
Yeah.
To celebrate that you and I are sitting here in the year 2024 having a great conversation about the state of our world,
Yeah. Yeah. That is very rich. How to hold the joy
Yeah.
and the sadness.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult one to sometimes to navigate, because you can get pulled in the current of despair. As you were saying, your son, it's already damaged and destroyed, and so
Yeah.
what's the point? Right? And where I was landing with that was, at one level, is humans are just savages. Just general, not a particular group. And so there was this loss of faith in
Yeah.
humanness, which includes me, of course,
Yeah.
interestingly. And yeah, and then yeah, go ahead.
Which I think this touches, distinctly, on some of these wars that are happening in the world. That, one side has become so influenced by one story, and the other side has become so influenced by the other story, that they're both willing to absolutely massacre each other. Right? Or one's willing to just forget about it all and say, you know what? I have to kill at whatever expense.
Yeah.
Right? And this is like this is the extreme edge of what has manifested from this disease of forgetfulness. Right? Is that we have that part that can say, fuck it.
Yeah.
I have to kill at whatever expense, And, I think you can agree, we all have that within us because it's a part of our human experience. We can be all of it. We're not, free.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an important point, is to be open, as you're touching on some of these themes, is, can I open up to that grief? That in for me, I did have these moments at the sort of where I paused and disconnected from the because for me, when I started to become interested in Palestine and Israel, it started with more of a prayer. I was like, how is it that a certain level of suffering can be happening and I'm meditating and living a life that has no connection with that? So
Yeah.
it was interesting. My prayer was for, I want to be connected. I wasn't watching the news, doing nothing. And then all of a sudden I became introduced to my friends who were launching this documentary, which they made by traveling all over the world, 6 or 7 different indigenous communities in New Zealand, Brazil, Palestine, Canada, Arizona.
Yeah.
And anyway, so it just was so clear that was a response to my prayer, that we're releasing that. And I was like, oh, I'm supposed to do something this, and I started to educate myself.
Yeah.
So the culmination of that was just at some moments this enormous, like a wave of grief,
Yeah.
and that I have no idea. I don't know why this is happening, and I don't know how to solve this, and I also don't have the capacity to engage with this, literally a minefield of narratives. I don't see what the point of it is.
Yeah.
Because they're very passionate discussions, very invigorating at times.
Yeah.
Elements of hatred, and we could just go to war, or just very smart. It's like, where does this end?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's
Yeah.
just, as you're saying, it's like a totally mental, disconnected world from the heart,
Yeah.
and from that is holding us.
And I think that this is exactly the place where a lot of people fall into the despair aspect, is because it just leaves us, it can leave any one person at a place of, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to solve these complex problems on our planet, and when we find ourselves in despair, oftentimes we find ourselves in that aspect of numbness. That's like, okay, well, I'll block it off and just figure out a way to, keep living through each day. And I think this, is where this thread of the loneliness and the remedy for the loneliness, becomes a very exciting topic. What is the remedy for our loneliness? Well, in obvious terms, togetherness is the remedy for loneliness, is to feel that we actually have community, where we can have just a moment to be held in whatever it is that we're feeling. Right.
Yeah. And actually, let me just give you a prompt here for something that you mentioned yesterday, that we have this epidemic of loneliness and depression, and you name it, and we have this polarity that's going on. And we already touched on this, but there is this massive disconnections of things that we don't even know why they are happening. In fact, we're trying to solve them from the psychological standpoint. And okay, how do I make enough money, or whatever have you? All those narratives that exist in our culture. But you alluded to the fact of we're not taking into perspective what is happening in our bodies, and how many elements are we missing in this conversation of healing?
Yeah. Well, my mind goes immediately to the design, the way our current day structure has been designed, where everyone's in their own home, working their own job, driving their own car, eating from their own dinner table. Everything's very, kind of individualized, right? And I think that's a huge flaw in the design, because in that creation of a very individualized experience, it keeps everyone, you know, in survival, essentially, right? And when we're in survival, how often do we get the opportunity to sit and just sit down and say like, well, how am I feeling? How is my body feeling right now? You know, where do I feel tension in my body? Where do I feel contraction in my body? Right? And I think that you can agree with me that probably a majority of the people don't get that leisure to have that, you know, and thus it's obvious to me why there's so much sickness and disease, because we've all become so distant to our bodies. Everyone's being fed, you know, the food, the television, you know, the chemicals. I mean, we're just bombarded on every front.
Yeah.
Every front.
Yeah.
You know? And when are we all going to say that's enough? You know, this is not the way. This is not creating a life forward to where we can all have the opportunity to thrive.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You had earlier mentioned your earlier years of Jen's the optimist,
Yeah.
extreme optimist. I love that.
Extreme optimist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't really go wrong with that, I think.
Well,
I mean, you can't,
until
but in the long
you
run,
realize you're bypassing the shit out of
yes.
something.
Okay. Yes.
And
That's different.
you
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
get very honest with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually, let me also connect. That's a great theme, but let me connect it to the previous thread where I was saying that as I came in contact with grief, I also saw that the next day, or after a meditation, or after a good sleep, or meeting a friend, I could not help but wonder that there was a consistent barrage of beauty and joy. And I could not reject it. And I found myself in, is this okay? You know, is joy okay? Is beauty okay? Okay, I have this. I look on my one side and I see massacres happening and
Yeah.
these debates, and I have the choice to, not the choice, but it's being offered all the time. When I
Yeah.
see it, it's like, oh, you know, I'm spending time with my nephew and having a beautiful meal, or
Yeah.
how beautiful the day is.
Yeah.
And that itself is a mystery to me. And I've for now I've surrendered. It's like, I have no clue.
Yeah.
But I'll just not block any of it.
Yeah. Well, I think the truth of reality is that there is always so much to be grateful for. You know, how many times have we heard a lot of, you know, stories of the people who have made this long journey through the dark night of the soul and come out the other side, you know, basically saying through that, you know, terrible, you know, experience of my own death, which was really just the parts of me dying that no longer served, you know, I was able to finally come to a place of just being able to say thank you for life. And when we actually get out of our minds, you know, which are filled with the stories that tell us all the reasons why life isn't going well for us, and we just sit out on our porch in the sunshine and watch the wind blow the leaves and really take in the color of the green and the blueness of the sky and say like, wow, this is beautiful. You know, yes, I'm present to the experience in my body, and this is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's like we are all of it. We are the shadow and the light, you know, and that's why shadow work has become such a love of my life over these past 15 years is really diving into the shadow work, because I've come to find that within the shadow is it's that which allows me to be at ease with myself, because that too is a part of me. And I don't need to make it disappear or go anywhere, or I don't need to, cultivate a story that says because of this, I have to feel this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can see that for what it is.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it eradicates it completely. The deep shame or guilt or feeling of not belonging, all the many ways that, our wounds can be expressed. But at least I have context to know that that too is perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
Which, coming full circle into the greater aspect of our world, this all too is perfectly imperfect.
Yeah. Let's maybe say this is something I wanted to ask you. Maybe let's briefly unpack it, because I know we're also getting close to the time.
Yeah.
And so perfectly imperfect. Yeah, this surrender that we are speaking of for not knowing, right? And it's a paradox, because it's not knowing in a way of becoming impotent and having a lack of action. But to me, it seems like that is the only true place of engagement, of creative engagement, from where solutions come. Going into endless mental narratives, which sound very smart, doesn't really will lead us to a better place.
Yeah.
And that requires that word that you used, the phrase, perfectly imperfect. Could you unpack it? Because that is a worldview. I mean, I have some illusions to what that is, but
Yeah, I think it's, obviously, you might hear that phrase often in the context of healing and, inner work, that
I haven't. So.
you have it perfectly imperfect, that even our most deepest flawed places, they're perfect. We spend a lot of time wanting to change or get rid of things. I think we're in a get rid of culture. Well, let's just get rid of it. Gosh darn it. I'm done with that. I just want to get rid of it. I think I said that to myself today. I just want to get rid of this thing that's just bothering me so much. In my mind, right? When I'm in my mind, I want to get rid of it. When I can drop down into my heart, well, I can see, okay, well, that is a part of me too. This challenging experience is giving me the opportunity to learn or discover something about myself. Something. And if we could go through every experience in our life with that idea, whether it be a thought or an experience or a relational exchange that we're having, is that this is here teaching me something about myself, right? What is this teaching me about myself, this conversation that I'm having with Ganon? It's teaching me that there's a place for me to show up and speak the truth of my passionate and devotional heart, that maybe there's something within me that has the potential to be received by someone else, that will be a little nugget that will inspire profound change and goodness in a direction for another's well-being, right? I think this illuminates the path of the Bodhisattva, is that when we begin to have that desire within us, that I want every action to have a positive result for something else, for someone else, for the benefit of life beyond myself, right? We're now, in a much different place. So why do I show up for my wounds that oftentimes I think are not perfect? what even is this idea of perfect? Right? We've been taught that that perfect even exists, right?
Yeah.
Through this notion of you can always do it better, you can always refine it more, right? There's always something that can happen that will make it, more than what it is, versus maybe this is enough. Maybe this is enough. And if I can sit fully right now with the little boy within myself that feels like he doesn't belong, well, if I can really get with that, the result is I feel it right now. I feel a lot of joy. I feel that little boy saying thank you. I feel safer now, knowing that you can hold me in, that place where I don't feel like I belong. And I think it illuminates, kind of the core of what we all want. We just want to know we can be held in these places that are tender and vulnerable and hard to feel. Places that we don't really want others to see or know about us. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That I know my brother can hold me there, or I know my, family member can hold me. And you and I both know that often isn't the case.
Yeah.
So it perpetuates this predicament of, is it okay to be me?
Yeah.
Is it okay to be me?
Yeah. Yeah. It's an infinity out there. So yeah, I think there's a space for everything.
Yeah.
Clearly, we are here because there's a space.
Yeah. And
yeah.
the answer is yes.
Yes.
It is okay to be your full, empowered, embodied, loving self.
Totally.
It's okay for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we could give a message today, wouldn't we want that to be the message, for your listeners?
Yeah.
That's okay to be your fully empowered, embodied, loving self.
Yes. Yes. So maybe last prompt, which I'm coming back to what I mentioned earlier. So the youthful, optimistic gens, and here we are today. What is the state of affairs of the faith, of the optimism?
I think the optimism has shifted into a more into a maturation. Now I think I'm less attached to optimism. I'm less attached to the energy behind optimism. I think before I was kind of holding optimism as like a state that this is all great. It's all great. Well, the truth is it's not all great. It's not great that our waters have been contaminated. It's not great that our forests have been cut down. It's not great that there are so many sick and dying people on this planet, starving people on this planet, thirsty people on this planet, unsheltered people on this planet. Right?
Yeah.
These things aren't great. So now it's more that I feel I'm mature enough to sit with everything and know that what I can give to each and every one of those experiences is my greatest love through the power of my presence. Right? That's I would say my my aspiration. That I can show up and give my greatest love in every moment through the power of my presence. That I can show up in every moment and give my greatest love through the power of my presence. And feel what it's like, truly what it's like, what it feels like inside of me to hold all of it. And to know that I don't have to hold it all alone.
Yeah.
It's not mine to hold alone, and it's not yours to hold alone, and it's not any one person's to hold alone.
Yeah.
But we can hold it together.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I love how you connected presence with love. Yeah, this presence can offer what needs to be done, as you're saying. You know, if it is my turn to do something, it will I'm available to whatever it is there, and yeah, and the thing is, it feels good. It feels right. It energizes us. It's not something to do, or it's not a project that I must remain present. It's the place of rejuvenation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I just also want to, give, a joy to optimism as well. That there is a time for optimism. We're gonna make it through. That's an optimistic statement. We're gonna make it through one way or another. And I value that. I value that. That the gift that optimism is in those moments when it's challenging, because it does connect us to faith and to a lot of the things that we spoke of at the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah. And I think how you mentioned early on, you were talking about honesty. Right? And I feel like if one is honest, which means that I am going to hold my sadness and my joy and curiosity, and not really reject anything. I'm open.
Yeah.
Then I feel that faith becomes very active.
Yeah.
That I don't know how. And also, interestingly, I don't know when.
Yeah.
Apparently we are eternal beings. So we have time, and that's another thing is often in our culture, in our wider conversations, as you were alluding to, we have no regard for the other beings, the water bodies and the mountains, and we can just drop bombs and change structures as they didn't have life.
Yeah.
But also we are disconnected from the context of the timelines. That we're not just born here as a blip and then we disappear. There's a lot more happening.
So much more happening.
Right.
And I think that's a great invitation, is just to acknowledge that there is so much more happening in every moment than we can possibly know. And we've lived, so much life within us, beyond this particular, manifestation of body as it is now, here, you and I.
Yeah. It's a wonderful note to perhaps bring this to a close. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kanan. Such a pleasure to dive into these conversations, and I appreciate you.
This is a prayer calling all the people. listen to her song. This is a prayer to change our direction. This is a prayer to remember why we're here. Calling all the people to unite in the power of love. Calling all the people to unite in the power of love. Love will change the world. Love will hold us all. Love will feed the people when the people can hear love's call. Love will house the homeless, clean water for all. Love will change the world when the people can hear love's call. Love will change the world when the people can hear love's call. This is a prayer to benefit all life, and this is a prayer to reflect upon this moment, and this is a prayer to make our voices heard, and this is a prayer for the power of one love. This is a prayer for the gift of a beating heart. This is a prayer for the clarity of mind. And this is a prayer for healing what is broken. And this is a prayer to unite in the power of love. This is a prayer to unite in the power of love. Calling all the people to unite in the power of love. Calling all the people to unite in the power of love. Love will change the world. Love will hold us all. Love will feed the people when the people can hear love's call. Love will house the homeless, clean water for all. Love will change the world when the people can hear love's call. Love will change the world when the people can hear love's call. Prayer is for the people to hear love's beckoning call. Oh my, prayer is for the people to hear love's beckoning call. Oh, we sing out for the mother, we sing out for us all. We rise for the mother who holds us all. We live for each other, we live for love's call. We live for the mother and the benefit of all. We live for the mother and we answer to love's call. We live for the mother and we answer to love's call. the people can hear love's call.